Well, if that doesn't get you going, I don't know what will. Here at Vision, we want to get your heart pumping. We want to get your mind going. We want to be a catalyst in your week to where truly you take something home with you that affects you this week in your time with God. And so think about this phrase, you make me crazy. When was the last time you said that to somebody? Was it on the drive to church this morning? Was it last night? Was it at work? Was it with your kids? We're taking the next 6 weeks and focusing on that phrase, because we feel like relationships truly is what life is about. So when you have a relationship and your spouse drives you to a point where you say or you think, you make me crazy, we're going to talk about that. How about with your kids? That happens often at 3000 Farmhouse Lane. That happens at our house. You make me crazy. And we have to step back and say, okay, God, what do you want to do with that? With our friendships, with our dating, if you're single, or if your kids are going through dating, you're saying, man, that's making me crazy. Next week is going to be a tough one because we're talking about when you look in the mirror, and if you want to be real for a minute here, like Dave said, be real. Did you at all this week look in that mirror and somehow think, man, you make me crazy. I can't figure you out, Matt. And then today, we're talking about God. And do we ever have a time where we say or think or feel, God, you make me crazy? So we'll talk about that in just a minute. Before I do that, I want to talk about these. Because if you were watching social media at all this week, then you can fill in the blank. What's up? What's up? That's great. And also I forgot. Hey, Vision. Hey. Oh, man, I love that. Great. Okay, so these cups this week, it's amazing. We as a church that do try to be creative and forward-thinking, and at times we get pushback in the community that says, you can't put that up there or can't do that there. But you know what we can do? We can put cups everywhere. So in fact, I want to show you where some of these cups ended up this week, because last Sunday we talked about them. And if you missed it, you can get one on the table in the back. I'll explain that in a minute. But these cups showed up in people's houses when they said, you know what? I spend time with God, and He fills my cup so that I can pour my cup out. And so someone posted, so yeah, that's what I do for my family. When I get in the Word and even have the picture of my family right there. Then you see someone else took it to school. They put that on their desk, and hopefully people even asked them, teacher, what's up with that cup? And I think she would have said, you know what? God fills my cup, and I pour it out on you students. Next up, wow. Those girls are taking it with them to school. They're going over there to Greer saying, God's going to pour into our cup, and we're going to pour it out into somebody else. Next. Now, I don't know how they did that, breaking the law of physics, but up there in Dallas at Advanced Auto Parts, somebody took that cup and put it there, so hopefully throughout the day, people were saying, seriously, man, what is up with that sideways cup there? All right, then, this was actually the first one posted last Sunday afternoon by one of our students. She got this thing rolling. She did, and just got this momentum started from the start about what's up with the cup. Wow, somebody said, hey, I got to have some cake with my cup and eat it too, or I'm not sure, but they pour into my cup, buy good food, and then the chickens out of Bit of Hope Ranch looked at me, and if you could understand chickenese, I guess, they somehow clucked and said, Matt, what's up with the cup? And they just looked at it and said, hey, you're safe. We don't do anything with those chickens besides take eggs and have fun with them. So those chickens are nice and safe. No chickens were injured in the filming of this video. But what's up with the cup? Because indeed, God wants to pour into us, but not just for the sake of us absorbing that and enjoying it, but also and especially for the sake of pouring it out. So this week, you can grab your blue cup, mark it up how you want to, whether it was a vision or a sticker or a smiley face or a verse, and go out there and post it and use the hashtag, what's up with the cup. And we're just going to keep spreading the word. Tuesday night, I was at Logan's having dinner with a friend, and someone was sitting in the booth next to us, and they looked over and said, hey, I hear Vision is going really good, great. I said, thank you. And they said, so seriously, what is up with the cup? I was like, great, it's getting out. So let's talk for a couple minutes, about crazy. As if you're like me, you don't want to get to a spot where you actually are saying or yelling or screaming, you make me crazy. But there are times, I feel like, maybe we get there with people in our lives or maybe even with God. So this series, the 6 weeks, we're going to talk about that. If you got your takeaway card when you came in, pull that out. And you'll see on there today, I've only got a couple things to fill in because really I'm going to be more like a storyteller today than necessarily a teacher, because Jesus was my favorite storyteller, and in that was a teacher. On your takeaway card, you'll see a couple blanks you can fill out, but especially I want you to see on there some of the recommended readings during the week. And each week when we build our messages, we find some other parts of the Bible that intersect with it so you can dig into it during the week. And like Dave said, a piece we're going to have ongoing for a year is reading through the New Testament. And if we're going to be honest here, I got a couple days behind this week, and I caught up, so that's good. But it is very sustainable to read a chapter a day in the New Testament, 4 days in your week. And there's actually a cool devotional. If you see it there on Bible.com or the Bible app, there's a little devotional that will help unpack it. So the recommended readings, tell you, for the next 12 months, you'll keep hearing from us, reading the New Testament, reading the New Testament. We're going to do that together. Now, you see in your takeaway card a bottom line. Let me jump to that, because our bottom line this week, I actually wanted you to help write it in, because I want to reinforce this principle so much today, this bottom line, that at times it may seem like God makes me crazy. But the reality is, God cares for me. At times, you may shake your fist, say, God, you're making me crazy. I'm not understanding you. You're not doing the things I ask. You're not answering my questions when I ask. The person I was praying for, they didn't get better. They died. The financial situation we got, it's not working. The fear and anxiety I have, it doesn't feel like you're helping. I'm calling out to you, and I don't feel like you're there. You're making me crazy. And God just echoes back, says, I care for you. I care for you. Jesus taught about this. At Vision, we believe Jesus and the things written in the Bible are true. He was a guy who walked this earth, and there were 4 different accounts of his life. We're going to look today in the book of Luke. But Jesus is an amazing teacher. And what I tried to do when I prepared today's message was think, what other elements would Jesus use to reinforce the teaching in this story he tells? Because the environment he was in, when you pick up in Luke 15, you can look in your Bible, on your iPad, or up on the screen, and I'm going to read some of it and tell some of it. But in Luke 15, Jesus is in a crowd that honestly was not as welcoming as this crowd. The crowd he was talking to included these guys called Pharisees, who were looking for something wrong in him, who wanted to find something wrong and call him out in it and prove him wrong. There were tax collectors and sinners, this like group of people that were looked down on as being the worst of the worst, or people that clearly God could never love. But actually, those people were in the crowd too. And there were some people in there that followed Jesus. There were some people in there who eventually would die for Jesus. And there's some people in there just searching, saying, I don't even know who Jesus is. And Jesus comes to teach them. And he talks, it's interesting, he talks in a progression about things that get lost. First, he talks about losing a sheep. And I thought back to when me and Meg used to have a dog named Raven. And we would take Raven out to Crowder's Mountain Park. And you're supposed to keep your dogs on a leash out there. We'd walk her, but she was such a good girl. But she had a little hound dog in her. And we'd let her off the leash for a little bit. And usually, she'd be gone. And the sun's going down. The park gates are getting ready to close. And we could not find Raven. So to us, losing our dog, which she always came back, but it always felt like we were about to lose our dog. So I can kind of relate. Lost sheep, lost dog. Then there's, losing this coin. This lady in the second story, Jesus talks about a lady who had 10 coins and lost one of them. And to us, it's like, what, a quarter? What's about losing that? No. All her earnings were encapsulated in these 10 coins. So how would you feel if you felt like you lost 10% of everything you owned and you couldn't find it? And one time we had a situation where we had an envelope with some money in it we were supposed to take to the bank, and somehow it got in a stack of stuff and we couldn't find it. And so we're stressed out. We're looking around our house trying to find this lost coin, if you will, that means so much to us. I remember waking up that next morning and I'm thinking, what if it got out into the trash? Because it was trash day. So I went out to the road and opened up our big old roll-out trash can, and I'm digging through, and literally in one of our kitchen bags, inside there was the envelope with the money in it. And I pulled it out, and literally minutes later, the trash man came, and it would have been gone. So I can relate to this lady who was frantically looking for her lost coin. Then you go to part 3. And Jesus, again, in his mastery, he's talking about a sheep, which you value that. Then he talks about 10% of your money, which you value that. And then he talks about losing a kid. I mean, that hits home tight. When we were at the beach a couple years ago, at one of the little mini water parks, kind of like the freebie you get with some of the condos, and there's the lazy river and the water thing and the bucket and all that, and our middle child, Elijah, was, I don't know, maybe he's 8 or 9 or something at that point, and we're like, well, everybody stay inside the park, don't go anywhere. We get to a point we can't find him. At first, we're like, okay, he must be over here or here, and you know how you're as a parent, and you're like kind of worried, but not really, and then it gets worse, and then you're like really facing reality, like really, has something happened, and we're frantically looking around this park until he comes floating by in a lazy river. What's the worry? What's everybody scared about? Get up here, son. Oh, we missed you. Don't do that again. Oh, we missed you. And, it's just like that vicious cycle of love that we showed Elijah when we had that fear of a lost son. So Jesus is talking to his crowd, and he starts to talk about a lost son. So let me tell you this story. You've probably heard this term before, a prodigal. Whether you've been in church before or not, and you think prodigal. Okay, so this story of the lost son or the prodigal son, let me kind of give you a definition on prodigal. That's kind of synonymous with reckless, if you will. And that's not a complete definition. I'll kind of finish that in at the end. But if you think about him telling this story about the prodigal son, the lost son, recklessness. Well, Jesus starts telling the story. And the way I'm going to tell it is I'm going to give you some of the characters in the story, and I'm going to name them, just so people are always saying, Matt, I'm visual, I need some details. Okay, the son, this one who ends up running off, his name's Chase. We're going to call him Chase. Then there's the older son. We're calling him Freddie, and then there's the father. So I get you to know these guys. They all live together on this big property, and of course the dad, he's running it. And now Freddie, they kind of call him Ready Freddie because he's always on time for work and doing the right things and doing an excellent job for his dad, and just loved on by him and all the staff. Chase, he's a little more of a wild hair, a little more free spirit who does the work, but also kind of wants a little more freedom. And from time to time, he's saying, Dad, can I try this, or can I get some of this, or can I go do this, or take this off? And he feels like he's not being heard. He feels like he's not really being understood or cared for or loved. It's not about him; it's about everything else. And he gets to a point where we pick up the story here in Luke 15. Where he gets together with his dad to talk about this. So some of the visuals I'm going to use today, I want you guys to be able to kind of lock in with where we're going. So this first one is a picture of a fence. So I imagine one day his dad's over there kind of leaning on a fence, kind of like scoping out their place and just thinking, and Chase walks up to him. And, we help run a ranch, and a lot of great conversations happen on a fence, particularly for guys. Because, guys, we're not good doing this. We're kind of good looking like this. So he gets up there on the fence, and they're talking. I think Chase is probably like, Dad, I feel like you don't really understand me and the things I want to accomplish in life, and I want some more freedom. In fact, Dad, I want to cash in my inheritance. I want that now. I wonder if his dad just kind of looked off in the distance and was like, that's strange. You're supposed to get that when I die or when I retire. And here my son is asking for it, which in those days, being the younger son, that means he would get 1/3 of everything his dad owned. So standing there talking, I think Chase even was kind of nervously, almost like fumbling with his hand where he had the family ring on. Because I think in his mind, he was like, I kind of need to be like freed from like the boundaries of your leadership, Dad. I want my part of the inheritance, and I want to go and make a name for myself. Because you don't understand me. And his dad, I think, probably just said, Chase, I care for you. I really do. I care for you. Now, in guy language, that really is I love you. But us as guys have a hard time saying that. In fact, let's just hear it one time from the men in the room and the boys. Say, I love you. Oh, man, I didn't know you guys felt that way about me. Thank you. That's nice, Bill. As guys, though, we have a hard time saying that, except for Zach. But every other guy has a hard time saying that. So the most you're going to get maybe is a dad leaning on the fence, talking to his son, saying, man, I care for you. And the son coming back saying, no, I don't think you do. You don't understand me. You don't know what I want. You don't answer me sometimes when I have tough questions, and you're not around enough. And I want my stuff. Can I have my inheritance? I want to go. And Dad says, I'll think about it. So what I imagine is probably maybe about a week later, Dad says, hey, Chase, meet me in the office. They go in the office. And he sits down there, and he's got a bag, whatever, of money, I guess, or gold coins, or however they cash in stuff then. And Chase comes and sits down, And his dad says, okay, I've honored your request. I'm going to give you a third of what I own. I've had to sell some of the back property. I've had to lay some people off. I've had to cash in some things, but here is your 1/3. And Chase, I think, again, he'd kind of been fumbling with it, and he kind of like takes off the ring and maybe symbolically kind of like puts it down on his dad's desk and says, okay, I'm going to take that, and I'm going to go. And his dad says, Chase, if you only remember one thing, just remember that I care for you. I will always care for you. Chase says, okay, I'm out of here. He takes it. He's gone. Now, Luke 15, picking up verse 13, says, not long after that, the younger son got together all he had. He set off for a distant country, and there he squandered his wealth in wild living. Now, let's think about this squandering, this going away, and this guy Chase, who he's got, a bunch of stuff now. I mean, his dad was loaded, so he's got a third of loaded. And he goes away. Who knows how far his journey is, but when he gets there, and he's making friends, because, hey, friends definitely want to hang out with you. When you got money to spend, they're hanging out with you. He's buying stuff. He's, wasting stuff. He's feeling great about life. Imagine, Taylor, next picture, a campfire. Say he's sitting around a campfire with these new friends. And maybe one night they're sitting around talking about like how they all got there. Because they all should be like at some home somewhere, some family somewhere. And maybe it's going around the campfire and some of the guys are like, man, my dad, he used to beat me. And I could not wait to get out from underneath him. Another guy was like, oh yeah, man, my dad would yell at me. He was so mean to me and he just didn't understand me at all. Somebody else said, man, I didn't even have a dad. So I just left home and now I'm kind of charting my own course. And they kind of like look at Chase. They're like, Chase, how about you, man? What's your story? And for a second, it flashes into his mind, standing on the fence, leaning on the fence, his dad's saying, I care for you, Chase. He's like, I just had to go. Just had to go. Okay. And they move on from there to where Chase, he starts running out of money. And in fact, there was a famine in the land, so he's getting in bad shape to even find a job. To where he's running out of so much money that all he can find is working with these guys. And you say, you work with pigs in your job? He was working with pigs. To where his job was to go and clean out the troughs of pigs. Now understand, as a Jewish man, this was like the lowest. Because to Jews, pigs were unclean, pigs were unholy. I mean, you wouldn't touch them, you wouldn't eat them, you wouldn't come around them. So here he is now, he's working with them. And not only is he working with them, let's see in verses 14 through 16, it says, after he'd spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went, hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. Chase, this guy, he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When I was up in Michigan, I was a teenager, and I worked at a pizza and sub shop. And I'd work late nights there, and at the end of the night, I would kind of clean off the griddle with the big the big grease trap, carry it out to the dumpster, nasty stuff. Oh man, hot, dirty, carry it out there, carefully dump that thing in the dumpster. And I was thinking, okay, so what if when I was doing that, I was in such bad shape, I was so poor that when I saw people eating in that restaurant and putting their scraps in the trash, that I couldn't wait until closing time, that I could go in the dumpster, open up a bag, and look inside that nasty bag with grease splattered on it and junk and trash, and reach in there to pick out a half-eaten sandwich that I would put in my mouth until somebody would look out the back door and say, hey, what are you doing in the dumpster? So, oh, nothing, and I'd shut the door and walk away. And imagine how I would think, man, how low have I sunk? How low have I gone in the food chain of life that I am digging through a nasty dumpster to get someone's trash that's got grease and dirt on it? And there was Chase. There was Chase asking, can I please even just dig in your trough to pull something out that the pigs didn't eat, the leftovers from the pigs? And I imagine Chase would sit there and think, what have I done? How did I get here? And I wonder if he thought back at all to his dad, who, if his dad was like me at all, maybe his dad was the kind of guy that would get up in the mornings before the whole staff and everything got moving, and he would go out kind of walk or get a coffee or whatever it is you do in your morning and look up at the stars and say, God, just take care of my family. Watch over my family. And wherever Chase is today, I pray that you would be there with him. I pray that somehow he would know that I still care for him. Imagine Dad getting up and doing that each morning, thinking about his son that way. And so I think maybe one morning, Chase woke up dirty, hungry, aching because he probably slept on the floor somewhere, lonely. And I wonder if he thought, what's my dad doing this morning? How does my dad feel about me now? And in Luke 15, verses 17 through the first part of 20, it says, when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am, starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven, against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. Let's take a look at the next picture. It's a picture of a trail. Imagine Chase that morning got up and started on some trail, on some road, on some long journey home, and he started devising a plan. He said, I got to have a plan if I'm going to go back to Dad. I got to have the right words to say that'll win him back. I have to have the right mentality or heart or humility or something that he would let me back in to his life. Maybe he walked for days, maybe weeks. I'm not sure how long that trail was that he walked and walked and walked until he got within the distance of home. Our next picture is a picture of an entry gate, as I maybe imagine maybe an entry gate would be like back then. And so Chase, imagine him walking up to this entry gate, and he knows what's inside that gate. He knows who's inside that gate. And before he even gets up there, and maybe since it's such a nice place, maybe there's even like a security guard or somebody on post. He's like, man, before I can even walk up to that guy, I need to think about if I can really do this. Because I'm embarrassed, I'm humiliated, maybe I'm bitter, I can't believe I have to come back. They're going to be mad at me. Is Dad even going to welcome me back? What's everybody else going to think? I don't know if I can do this. And he hears, Chase, and he looks up, and it's like, oh man, it's the guy at the gate. I got to go through with it. Is that you? Because he's got this beard, he's looking dirty and terrible. He said, yeah, I'm coming back home. And the guy says, well, come on in. Come on in. And Chase just starts walking down the driveway. Well, the hired guy, I would imagine, would have maybe kind of run a shortcut up to the house and run up there and said, hey, boss, your dad's back. Your son's back. Your son Chase is back. And the father has, I don't know, minutes or however long it would take Chase to walk that driveway to think about his son coming back. So Chase is walking up this driveway, devising his plan. And I think about me. I think about me when I mess up and I got to face God again, and the plans I create in my mind, and the right answers I'm going to give him, and the I'm sorry's, and I'll fix it, and I'll do betters. And Chase had his plan, and he walked up that driveway ready to unveil this plan to his dad. We see in verses 20b through 24, it says something quite different. Look at this. It says, while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, he threw his arms around him, and he kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven, against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. And look what the dad does. He speaks to his servants. He says, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For the son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. So Chase, like us, is amazed by his father's reaction. Chase, I think when he hears that, he flashes back to the times his father said, I care for you. Chase realizes that his dad never stopped caring for him. Chase realizes his dad doesn't need a plan. He doesn't need excuses. Chase realizes his dad just wants him back. His dad is going to treat him lavishly. His dad did that crazy thing of, you heard the ring in there? I think when he heard that Chase was back, He picked that ring up off the desk that Chase had left there, and maybe he put it in a drawer, and he brought it out and said, put this back on my son. He has never left our family. He thought he did, but he's always been a part of our family. So they're throwing a party. And when you think about Chase's perspective of his dad, that you make me crazy has now been just dominated by, I care for you. Now, if I was Jesus, I would have ended the story there. Because you got a crowd of people, some seekers, some doubters, and I think they would have said, oh, man, yes, our Heavenly Father, God, will take us back like that. And I think that would have definitely spoken to a large part of the group and been powerful. And I think there's more to it. Because Jesus, he continued with the story. He said, the party's going on. Freddie is out there working. And he comes back in. And as he comes in with his tool bag or his stuff, whatever, and he hears something going on in the house, like a party. He said, man, it's like Tuesday night. Why are we having a party? We never have a party during the week. What's going on? And he puts his stuff down, and one of the servants comes out. He's got a plate. He's got like one of these fancy goblets or something like that with a drink in it. And Freddie looks at him and says, party? And, man, what's up with the cup? Oh, it wasn't a blue one, though. But even back then, they were talking about it. So anyways, the servant says, Freddie, man, your brother is back. And Freddie steps back and said, what? Chase is back? After what he did? After the property we sold off? After my friends who got laid off because we didn't have enough money? After the work I've had to take on? After the way Dad and even Mom have been hurt by him going, he's back? And the servant said, man, I don't know, but your dad put a robe on him and gave him his ring back, and we're having a party. Why don't you come on in? Freddie said, man, I'm not going in there. He drops his stuff down, heads on the way. Servant goes back inside. A couple minutes later, the dad comes out. And we got our last picture. Again, conversations at the fence. I believe Freddie at the end of the day goes up and leans on the fence. He's just like looking out in the distance, just like seething. And his dad comes on out. He says, my son, the father said, you're always with me and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. That's hard to hear when you're Freddie and you're like, but I've done everything right. Where was my party? Where was my robe and all my special treatment? And of course, yeah, sure, I love my brother, but you're going to welcome him back like that? And God says, yes, I will. And I think Jesus looked out in that crowd and said, so any of you who think you want lost people to come to me, but then realize they're messy, realize that sometimes they're vulgar, that sometimes they've got an agenda that's way off base, but you know what? I care for them. I care for you. Come back to your father. I care for them. He's welcoming them back too. And as Jesus taught about this, I think about these three characters. First of all, Chase. That he thinks that God makes him crazy, that his dad makes him crazy. I think sometimes Chase says, man, I make myself crazy. And I can relate a lot to him. But we know what? We'll talk more about that next week in part 2. We talk about what makes me when I make myself crazy. Second person, Freddie. As we sit here at Vision and say, hey, we got this truly a direction of a church, of leading people to Christ and helping them live out God's vision for their life. Well, that's going to be a whole lot harder when there's people coming in that are messy and vulgar and struggling and dirty, and we're going to love them and say, come on with us. Let's go. Now, the third person, though, I want to talk about in the last couple minutes is this father. Because this father who had said, I care for you, like our Heavenly Father. And in fact, I want you guys to internalize this statement, God cares for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say a phrase, and I want to hear you say, God cares for me. So when I say, God, I don't understand you, and you say, God cares for me. When you say, God, the finances aren't working out, you say, the person I was praying for, they died. The questions I have, you don't seem to be answering. When when I turn my back on you, God, when I waste the things you've given me, when I go my own way and do my own thing. And before I read the last couple, I want you to think for a minute about a guy who was in the crowd that day. His name was Peter. And in fact, Wayne and Micah, if you guys would come on up, we got a picture of this guy Peter, who wrote in one of his letters later about God, because he'd heard it and seen it from Jesus. And in fact, we have a care team at our church and a care room at our church based on this, so that in fact, when we come up with our own plan and forget about grace, and when we start to approach him, and yet he runs to meet us, and when he gives us covering and blessing and love. So I want you to think about this. On your takeaway card with the bottom line, the definition is a little incomplete, because they'll pull this up and you'll see that the complete meaning of prodigal, it's not just reckless. There's something else to it. It's recklessly lavish. You understand? Out of those three characters, yes, Chase was reckless. But in fact, the guy who we thought was crazy, but all he keeps saying is, I care for you, the Father, he is the one who is recklessly lavish with the way he loves us and cares for us. So this is real, that God cares for us, and Tuesday or Thursday or next Saturday, when life is pounding you down, I want you to remember. All right, let's pray.